The Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law in July of 1990. It was one of the most consequential civil rights statutes of the century, and it changed the built environment of the United States permanently. Curb cuts appeared, ramps went in, doorways widened, bathrooms were rebuilt to a federal standard. Hotels across the country spent enormous sums bringing their properties into compliance. Almost none of that money did anything for Matt Roloff. The ADA, as written and as implemented, was overwhelmingly a wheelchair statute. When architects and hotel operators asked what accessibility meant, the answer came back in terms of turning radii, ramp gradients, grab bar heights, and door clearances, all of it calibrated to a seated adult of average build. That was not an oversight born of malice. Wheelchair users were the most organized and most visible disability constituency in the country, and the physical barriers they faced were the most measurable. But a guest with dwarfism is not a seated guest. He is a standing guest with a different reach envelope, and nothing in the compliance checklist addressed him. So consider what a standard hotel room did to Matt Roloff on any given business trip. The light switch sits at 48 inches. The deadbolt and security chains sit near 60. The closet rod is at 66. The bathroom mirror starts around 40 inches from the floor and runs upward, which means a 4-foot guest sees the ceiling. Shower controls are chest height for a 6-foot man, which puts them overhead. The bed platform is roughly 2 feet high. The peephole, if the door has one, is at eye level for somebody a 1.5 feet taller. Every one of those measurements is a decision somebody made. None of them was made with Matt in mind. Now stack it. He was not an occasional traveler. He was a technical salesman for Silicon Valley computer companies, which in the 1980s and 1990s meant living out of hotel rooms. Altos Computer Systems, National Semiconductor, Sequent Computer Systems. That work involved flying to a customer site, checking in somewhere near an office park, and being sharp in a meeting the following morning. Multiply one difficult room by hundreds of nights across a decade, and it stops being an inconvenience. It becomes an occupational tax. There is a further cost that does not show up in any of those measurements, and it is the one Matt would have felt hardest. A salesman's entire product is confidence. He walks into a room, and in the first 90 seconds, the buyer decides whether this is a person who has his act together. Matt was already fighting the assumption that a 4-foot man could not command an enterprise deal. Arriving at that meeting having slept badly, having wrestled with a shower he could not reach, and a mirror that showed him nothing, is a handicap layered on top of a handicap. Hotel rooms were not a comfort issue for him. They were a professional performance issue. Most little people absorb that tax. They work around it. They ask hotel staff for help, or they travel with a small bag of their own improvised solutions, or they simply accept that a hotel stay will be harder for them than for the colleague in the next room. Matt did something else. He co-founded a company and sold the solution to the industry. That leap is less obvious than it sounds. Recognizing a problem is common. Recognizing that a problem is a market is rare, and it requires a particular kind of arrogance in the useful sense. The belief that your own frustration is representative rather than personal. Matt had reason to believe it. He had led Little People of America as its national president. He knew, from the inside, roughly how many people in the United States had a form of dwarfism, and roughly how many of them traveled for work. He had spent years in rooms full of people with the same reach problem, comparing notes on the same hotel indignities. Nobody had to run him a focus group. He had been sitting in the focus group for a decade. The company, Direct Access Solutions. The product, a short stature accessibility kit. Neither name is clever, and that is a point in their favor. This was equipment, not branding. What was actually in the case? Extension handles that fit over light switches and brought them into reach. Step platforms sturdy enough to stand on at a sink or a closet. Long-handled reaching tools for pulling clothes off a rod 6 feet up. Mirror extensions that gave a short-statured guest a reflection of his own face rather than the wall behind him. Modified adapters for door chains and deadbolts. Grip tools for handles and knobs turned at an angle a shorter arm cannot manage comfortably. Nothing exotic. Nothing that required a patent lawyer to explain. A set of well-chosen tools, sized and selected by somebody who knew precisely which ones mattered and, Just as importantly, which ones did not. There is no gadget in that case for the sake of making the case look fuller. Every item earned its place by having failed him somewhere first. The whole assembly traveled in a compact portable case, and the delivery model was the smartest part of the entire design. The kit was not installed. It was not a renovation. It did not require a hotel to modify a single room. It sat in a storage closet and went up to a guest on request, exactly the way a property delivers an iron, a hairdryer, or a rollaway bed. That distinction is worth sitting with because it is the difference between an idea and a business. A construction-based solution asks a hotel to spend capital, take rooms out of service, and permanently dedicate inventory to a guest population that might book a handful of nights a year at that property. No general manager approves that. A portable kit asks the hotel to buy or lease one case, put it on a shelf, and train the front desk to know it exists. That is a purchase order, not a capital project. Matt understood the difference because he had spent his professional life selling complex systems to businesses. He knew what a buyer could approve without escalating. He designed the commercial model around that constraint, and it is the reason hotel chains said yes. The timing was also right, and Matt read it correctly. The years after 1990 were the years the hospitality industry was being forced to think about access for the first time. Legal departments were reviewing properties. General managers were being asked questions they had never been asked before. Compliance budgets existed where none had existed in 1988. A salesman walking into that environment with a modestly priced, non-structural accessibility product was pushing on a door that was already opening. He was not asking hotels to care about something new. He was offering them an easy win in a category they were suddenly obliged to care about. The business ran as a straightforward sale or lease to hospitality groups. The chains stocked the kits. Guests requesting short stature accommodation received one. Hotels got a genuine inclusion story they could point to. Travelers got a functional room. Direct access solutions collected revenue. Now here is the part that separates this from most accessibility products on the market. Matt did not design it in the abstract. Consider how these things normally get made. A company identifies an underserved market. It hires consultants. The consultants convene focus groups, produce a requirements document, and hand it to an industrial designer who has never had the problem being solved. The result is usually adequate and never quite right because the person holding the pen has no body-level knowledge of what fails. Matt had 30 years of body-level knowledge. Every item in that case existed because a specific hotel room had defeated him at some point, and he had worked out what would have made it work. He was not gathering requirements. He was cataloging his own accumulated fixes. That is why the kit included mirror extensions. A consultant would not think of a mirror. A mirror is not a safety issue. It does not appear on any compliance checklist, and nobody is injured by a bad one. But a man who has spent 3 decades shaving by feel in hotel bathrooms puts a mirror extension in the case because dignity in the morning turns out to matter as much as reach. The STEP platform tells the same story. An engineer designing from a spec sheet would build one platform. A man who has actually stood on things in hotel bathrooms knows that the height you need at a sink is not the height you need at a closet, and that a platform which slides on tile is worse than no platform at all. Those are details you learn by nearly falling. The door chain adapter is the sharpest example of the 3. A security chain a guest cannot reach is not an inconvenience. It is a locked door the guest cannot lock, which means a traveler sleeping alone in an unfamiliar city without the one mechanism everyone else takes for granted. No compliance checklist in America flagged that. A man who had lain awake in a hotel room thinking about it put an adapter in the case. Inclusive design has a phrase for this now: nothing about us without us. The principle that the people affected by a problem should be central to designing its solution has become standard doctrine in disability advocacy, taught in design schools, written into procurement policy. Matt was doing it before it had a name, not because he had read the theory, but because he was the market, and he could not have designed it any other way. The money side deserves a clear-eyed look because it is easy to inflate this. Direct Access Solutions never disclosed revenue. It was not a large company by any measure. It was not going to make anyone rich. Hotel chains buy accessibility equipment in modest quantities, and the total addressable market for a short stature kit in 1990s America was small, thousands of properties at most, each ordering 1 or 2 units. What it was instead was a functional specialty business that served a real need and produced real income. That income mattered more than its size suggests. Matt and Amy bought 34 acres in Helvetia in 1990 for $185,000, and they did it without outside investors. A software salary alone makes that purchase tight for a couple with young twins on the way. A software salary plus a second revenue stream makes it possible. Roloff Farms exists in part because a hotel accessibility company was paying its founder. It is also worth naming what the company could not fix. A kit in a closet depends entirely on the front desk knowing it exists. Hotel staff turn over constantly. A property that bought a kit in 1996 might have a night clerk in 1999 who has never heard of it, cannot find it, and tells a tired guest that no, sorry, we do not have anything like that. The product solved the equipment problem completely, and the institutional memory problem not at all. That is the ceiling on every accommodation that has to be requested rather than built in. The guest has to know to ask. The staff has to know how to answer. Neither is guaranteed. Matt could not solve that from the outside, and it is probably one of the reasons his advocacy work later moved toward changing how the industry thinks rather than only what it stocks. Then there is what Direct Access Solutions reveals about how Matt operates, which shows up in everything he has built since. He does not stop at the complaint. Plenty of people with a legitimate grievance about hotel design will tell you about it at length. Fewer will draft a product specification. Almost nobody will build inventory, work out a lease model, and call on hospitality procurement departments until somebody signs. The distance between having an opinion and having a company is enormous, and it is measured in unglamorous work, sourcing, pricing, packaging, cold calls, follow-up. That is the part nobody romanticizes and the part that decides everything. Anyone who has watched Matt build on the farm has seen the same instinct in physical form. He sees a problem, he sketches something, and then he does the tedious middle part until the thing exists. There is one more commercial detail worth understanding, and it explains why a business this small could survive at all. The kit sold to institutions, not to individuals. Selling directly to little people would have been a miserable business. The customer base is small, geographically scattered, and impossible to reach efficiently. Marketing costs would have eaten any margin. Worse, it would have put the financial burden on the traveler, who would then be paying out of pocket for equipment that the hotel industry's own design choices had made necessary. Selling to hotel chains inverted all of that. One phone call reached hundreds of properties. The buyer had a budget line for exactly this kind of purchase, and the cost landed where it belonged, on the businesses that had built the rooms, rather than on the guests those rooms failed. That structural choice is not accidental. It is what a person who has spent his career in business-to-business sales does instinctively. What became of the company is harder to pin down than it should be. Operations carried on into the period when TLC first started filming The Family. Then television arrived and took Matt's time, as television does, and the daily running of a small accessibility business became difficult to sustain alongside a filming schedule and a farm. Some accounts suggest Direct Access Solutions was wound down or folded into Matt's other holdings. Others suggest it kept operating quietly for hotel clients, which a business of this kind can do indefinitely without any public presence at all. Its status in 2026 is not documented anywhere reliable, and anyone claiming certainty either way is guessing. What is documented is that the mission did not stop. Matt co-founded the Coalition for Dwarf Advocacy and serves as its president. Accessibility advocacy sits inside that organization's remit. The commercial vehicle may have gone quiet. The work continued in another form, without the invoicing. It is also the least known thing he has ever done, and that is partly his own doing. Matt has never made this company a centerpiece of his public story. It has never anchored an episode. It does not appear in his Instagram captions. No anniversary post, no merchandise, no retrospective. Set that beside the farm, which is documented to within an inch of its life. Every structure, every renovation, every pumpkin season photographed, captioned, and posted for an audience of hundreds of thousands. A business that quietly improved hotel stays for strangers received a fraction of that attention because it was not visual, not dramatic, and not filmable, which is a decent argument that it was the more sincere project of the two. There is a reason this story matters more than the sales figures justify. Fans know Matt Roloff as a farmer, a television personality, a builder of tree houses in western towns, and lately as a man selling a famous property. What gets lost is the length and seriousness of the business career underneath all of it. Enterprise software sales at 3 separate Silicon Valley companies, a national volunteer presidency, a speaking practice booked by major corporations, an accessibility company, a farm that became an agritourism operation drawing tens of thousands of visitors every October. Direct Access Solutions belongs in that list, and it is arguably the entry he should be proudest of, because it is the one where the product itself did good for people he would never meet. There is a wider point buried in this, and it is not really about hotels. The most common experience of disability in ordinary life is not dramatic exclusion. It is 100 small frictions a day that nobody intended and nobody notices, each one individually trivial and collectively exhausting. A switch too high, a shelf out of reach, a counter you cannot see over. None of it is anyone's fault. All of it adds up. Fixing that kind of problem is unglamorous work. There is no ribbon cutting for a mirror extension. There is no award for a reaching tool. The people it helps mostly never learn who made it possible, because the whole point of good accessibility design is that it disappears into the background, and the day simply goes better than it otherwise would have. Matt Roloff spent part of his working life on exactly that unglamorous thing, during years when nobody was watching him and there was no audience to perform it for. Somewhere, at some point in the 1990s, a little person on a business trip called down to a front desk and asked whether the hotel had anything to help with the light switches. And the desk said, "Yes, actually, we do. We will send it up." That guest slept better that night. He almost certainly never learned who to thank. The answer was a computer salesman in Oregon who got tired of shaving blind and decided to fix it for everybody. Had you ever heard that Matt Roloff built and sold a hotel accessibility product? Should more hospitality chains stock short stature tools as standard rather than on request? And do you think Matt has another product in him, or is the building he does now going to stay on the farm?